evening. You're watching Left, Right and Centre. I'm Nidhi Razdan. Tonight, the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister in 34 years, and now the UAE becomes a strategic partner, backing India's position on terrorism from Pakistan in the joint statement. Has this visit then seen a real breakthrough in the relationship? Also, as tensions rise between India and Pakistan, should India go ahead with the NSA level talks this week or call them off? That coming just as reports come in of a fresh ceasefire violation in the Poonch sector. But first tonight, we'd like to begin the program with an update on the blast in Bangkok, where we now know that at least 15 people have been killed in a blast outside a temple in the Thai capital. It was a powerful bomb that exploded outside a Hindu shrine. The bomb exploded at about 5:30 p.m. Indian time outside the Erawan shrine in the downtown Chidlom district, according to the police. Many Buddhists frequent this shrine as well. The temple is located on a main road through Bangkok's commercial hub and is surrounded by 3 major shopping malls. Understandably, a huge amount of chaos once those explosions went off. It's not clear. Also reports, unconfirmed reports coming in perhaps of other bombs also being detonated by security forces there. There were very clear pictures of burnt motorbikes on the main road that were also seen, also of injured people quickly being taken away. So that is still a developing story where we will try to bring you the very latest. I spoke to the Indian ambassador to Bangkok a little while earlier, and he said there had been no reports yet of any Indian casualties or injuries in this blast. The Ministry of External Affairs has also tweeted a number of helpline numbers. We'll just bring those up for you where people can call, and anyone who's there, any Indians who are there can call. If we can just bring up those numbers from the MEA. There are a number of helpline numbers that have been established, and there are officials there, the Second Secretary S.C. Sinha and Manas Mustafi, another diplomat who's there, who will be dealing with any queries that people have. We'll have more on that story a little later once we get more information. Well, the big story as we speak is Prime Minister Modi's visit to the UAE, the first by an Indian Prime Minister in 34 years. And a very, very significant joint statement has been issued by both countries just a little while earlier, in which, among other things, the partnership has been elevated to a strategic partnership, and also a tough message has been sent out to Pakistan, with both countries calling on all nations to fully respect and implement their commitments to resolving disputes bilaterally and peacefully without resorting to violence and terrorism. Also calling on states to reject and abandon the use of terrorism against other countries, dismantle terror infrastructures and bring perpetrators of terrorism to justice. This is a very, very important shift in the UAE's position, given their rather ambivalent stand perhaps in the past on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir and cross-border terrorism. So a very clear statement therefore, and support there coming from the UAE on India's position on cross-border terrorism. Also very importantly, both countries will now be fighting terror together. There is going to be counter-terrorism cooperation, intelligence sharing. There will be a dialogue between the national security advisors of both countries. They will meet, the NSAs will meet every 6 months. Defense cooperation, defense exercises, that mechanism has also been established, and also the UAE aiming to invest up to $75 billion to support investment in India's next generation infrastructure. So all of these extremely significant developments today. In about an hour and a half from now, the Prime Minister will actually be making a speech to the Indian community in Dubai. There are more than 50,000 people that are expected to turn up there in Dubai to listen to the Prime Minister speak. My colleague Ketki Angre is covering that visit and sent us this report.
They're certainly trying to beat the heat, but that doesn't seem to have deterred the enthusiasm at the Dubai Cricket Stadium. I'm not even quite sure if my voice can be heard over the wind, but let's try and get you some views from here. आप कहाँ से आए हैं? कहाँ से आए हैं?
केरला से आते हैं, केरला का।
अच्छा, और यहाँ पे इतनी ज्यादा गर्मी है, इतनी धूप है, बावजूद उसके आप इतने ज्यादा पहले आए हैं।
15 साल से काम कर रहे हैं हम लोग, 15 साल से।
अच्छा।
बहुत गर्मी में।
और इतनी गर्मी है यहाँ पर, फिर भी आप यहाँ पर आए हैं।
अपने लीडर को मिलने के लिए आए, कभी 35 साल हो गए, अभी इंडिया पे एक मील से भी यहाँ पे नहीं आया, इसके लिए उनको मिलने के लिए हमारे लीडर को।
आप क्या कहेंगे?
हम बहुत खुशी है, हम इंडिया से इधर आ गए। मोदी जी हमारा बहुत प्यार आदमी है, बहुत प्रधानमंत्री, अच्छा प्रधानमंत्री।
हम ओमान से आए हैं, ओमान मस्कत से। मोदी से मिलने के लिए, उनको सुनने के लिए और देश के प्रति जो उनकी सेवा है उसके लिए हम उनके बहुत
आभारी है। मोदी जी के बहुत आभारी, हमारे देश को संभालने के लिए उनको करोड़ों करोड़ों धन्यवाद। ऐसे प्राइम मिनिस्टर हमें मिले हैं जिंदगी में, हमेशा याद रखेंगे और हमेशा वही जीते। हमारी कामनाएं, शुभकामनाएं उनके साथ हमेशा रहे।
It's still a while before the Prime Minister will even come to the stadium and address people, but even before that, people already, their spirits are pretty high, and even the muggy weather, the high levels of humidity and heat have not managed to deter their enthusiasm. In Dubai, with camera person S. Dhanpal, Ketkiamre for NDTV.
Well, certainly always very colourful whenever the Prime Minister does address the Indian community in whichever country he's in. Well, joining us here in the studio, former diplomat J. Parthasarathy, someone who's dealt with Gulf countries closely when he was in the Ministry of External Affairs. We also have with us Nalin Kohli of the BJP, Abhishek Singhvi of the Congress will be joining us, and Mr. K.C. Singh, who has also served in the UAE in his capacity as a diplomat, joins us tonight as well. Let me ask the two diplomats then, Mr. Parthasarathy, to you first. Let's look at this joint statement. Pretty tough words, particularly on Pakistan, without naming Pakistan. A message clearly, about the UAE's shifting its position, and also perhaps a message by India on the eve of the NSA talks.
You know, I look at this region holistically. And the Arab Gulf states, we have about 7.5 million people. We have remittances amounting to around $45 to $50 billion. And the UAE particularly is our second largest export market after the United States, with huge potential for investment if we get our act together. I think the most important thing, Nidhi, which has emerged here, and we should understand the geopolitical context. You are getting, after the Iranian nuclear deal, a lineup of the Gulf Arab states very nervous not only about Iran but also about ISIS, with even Israel on the one hand, and Iran trying to find its way around on the other. For us, I think, let's start. Dr. Manmohan Singh's visit to Saudi Arabia created a good ambience in the Gulf. I think that when you talk about Pakistan, the real downslide started when they appeared to have promised Saudi Arabia defense assistance and backed off from Yemen. The first person to launch a scathing criticism of Pakistan when that happened was the UAE foreign minister, or the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, which was astonishing. UAE never does that.
Which is why this joint statement
so this is very clearly, I mean, that's Pakistan. But if you see the communique, we are talking of a security partnership extending from South Asia, the Gulf, to West Asia. After all, the Gulf lies on our routes to West Asia. So I think it is extremely important, with the changing American position, the new alignments, that countries where we have so many people with such potential for investment turn to us. And I think we should build on it. We've had this, as I said, starting off with Saudi Arabia, which has handed over terrorists to us. I doubt very much if after this Dawood will set foot in the United Arab Emirates.
Well, very, very interesting what you say. Ambassador K.C. Singh, would you agree with Ambassador Parthasarathy's assessment of that? Would you say that this joint statement marks a shift, a big shift politically, certainly, in the relationship between the two countries?
I would call it an evolution. It is not a shift, and we must look back to what was happening. I was there at a very crucial moment from 1999 to 2003, 2 years before 9/11 and 2 years after 9/11. So I think with 9/11 the shift had already begun, but UAE had backed themselves into a corner as a country which had relations with the Taliban. They were not terribly happy with that, but they, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, were in that corner. But 9/11 sort of explained, because one of the persons flying in the planes which were crashed in America happened to be an Emirati. He happened to be from Ras Al Khaimah. So that was a wake-up call for UAE, and I could see a distinct difference in how they dealt with the counter-terror cooperation, because after 9/11, December attack on Indian Parliament, for the first time I got listing from them of the SIM card which he had managed to get, an Emirati SIM card, which the terrorists carried in their cars, but we were able to get that back after they were knocked out. They gave us the printout. So the change had begun then. But then I think what was happening was that even India was, your own position has to evolve. It has to evolve both ways. And the larger geopolitical thing, I think for us, if their relations with Pakistan were a concern, their main concern has been India's relations with Iran. And because I went to Iran after being ambassador to UAE, I'm very aware of that. So this is one of the factors, because like between India and Pakistan we have a territorial dispute. UAE has a territorial dispute over 3 islands which they claim were forcibly seized by Iran as they were becoming independent in 1971. So there is a shift which has been underway since then. But this particular joint statement means that we have taken the bull by the horns, and Prime Minister going there and engaging the person who really is the last word on national security issues, which is the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, I think, was the only way to deal with it. And this is certainly a quantum jump, but it would depend on how you play the other cards. It would depend on how you play the Iran card. It will depend on how you further proceed with this. Otherwise, it will be just a statement of good intent.
But before I get the 2 spokespersons in, would you agree with Mr. Parthasarathy when he says that he thinks it would be tough for Dawood Ibrahim to set foot in the UAE again? Or is that, would you be cautious on that? Mr. Singh, that was for you.
You see, what had happened was that even while I was there post 2001, they had assured me that Dawood had been warned that were he to transit through UAE after 2001 to 2003, they will grab him and send him back. And Dawood's brother actually was deported. And therefore Dawood changed his modus operandi about then. He may have gone through, may not have gone through, but I was assured that if you get any inkling and let us know, and they said they had warned him that was he to be caught in UAE, he'll be handed over to India. So that's why I'm saying the change had begun then. But then it also has to lead to more proactive cooperation, intelligence sharing. There, I think over the last 7, 8, 9 years, we sort of lagged.
Well, I think then you, Ambassador Parthasarathy, you're saying that actually Dawood still managed to get away with it.
I think Casey would know better, but the Dawood's sort of daughter getting married to Javed, that son, took place there later on. Yeah.
All right.
But
let me
but he never showed up in the hotel.
Well, he was known to have been there.
Well, Abhishek Singhvi, the Congress today was extremely upset though with what the Prime Minister said earlier when he was talking to investors in the UAE about inheriting a government with flaws, troubles, lethargy, indecision and so on. But quite apart from the politics for just a moment, would you at least concede that there is a strategic movement forward, an important forward movement in this India-UAE relationship which is important for India?
I've heard patiently what has been said, Nidhi. First, I think we do disservice to the excellent structure we have of foreign policy to assume that there are shifts, as you put it. There is a far greater continuity in foreign policy than people imagine, irrespective of political vicissitudes, and that's the way it should be. And I think this is building upon building upon building. There is a fundamental continuity and consistency, and I think that's good for the country. Political color and governmental color changes has a more direct and a more immediate impact on all areas except foreign policy, where it should be minimal. There have been great initiatives in the past with the Middle East, generally with Saudi Arabia, with Iran, with the UAE, and I think this is carrying it forward, and I would to that extent always support something which carries it forward. Second, where we are critical is on this rather bad habit which has started for the last year in particular, that on foreign soil, something which is conventionally never done, you start criticizing governments of your country, and that's the principle. Here you have me supporting a evolutionary movement ahead, and there you have the BJP government, not only the Prime Minister earlier many times last year, but other ministers on other foreign trips are extremely critical of India, something which we could have easily done, but we don't believe in it. Nehruvian policy never believed in it, subsequent Prime Ministers don't believe in it. It paints you in a poor picture, people laugh at you. Take your domestic squabbles and fight it out in the Bihar election drop. Don't think every foreign policy meeting is a election stump meeting. That's our fundamental objection. I think more than us, it paints you in a poor light. It paints the Prime Ministerial office, it paints the continuity and the institutionalized continuity of foreign policy in a poor light. Thirdly, I think the most important part in this part of the world especially, has been for some time and more so now, is the economic engagement. And it is actually the economic engagement which is making the estrangement from imploding republics like Pakistan, this estrangement is increasing from these countries, because these are countries very conscious of a stable economic environment. They would hate to have the splinter groups of Pakistan exploding bombs in their territory, and therefore, despite Pakistan's crude attempts at religious identity, which they've done in many times in the past, a lot of the countries in this region are moving away, rightly moving away, and realizing that playing the religious card actually is going to create a huge problem for them.
Dr. Singhvi,
they live and they survive on this.
Before I move on to Nalin, I just want to ask you, you said it's an evolutionary policy, but the fact also is that did we do enough? Did India do enough under the UPA to reach out to, for instance, countries like the UAE, where you have such a huge Indian community as well?
Absolutely.
Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was meant to go there at least on 2 occasions, and those visits never materialized. So, in a sense, did the UPA government ignore this part of the world, and something that Narendra Modi has now
I'll tell you why not.
Put on center stage?
I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why not. You've already heard from somebody else about Saudi Arabian initiative. The real problem is that Mr. Modi has replaced his own foreign minister, and he has led the country to believe that foreign policy works only when prime ministers visit. Now, while it is true that some visits had to be cancelled by Dr. Manmohan Singh because of logistical problems or other issues, there were several visits by the foreign minister. I remember UAE visits by Salman Khurshid when he was foreign minister. Now, the problem is that the optics, the drama, the great ostentation, the big speeches, the optics are more dramatic. Mr. Modi is a far greater communicator, but a lot of that communication is just a certain amount of optics. The Prime Minister during our time may not have visited, but there were solid links. Senior bureaucrats, Foreign Minister, a lot of the trade ministers. That is ignored, because as I said, Mr. Modi has believed in replacing his own foreign minister.
No, but there is a big difference between when the Prime Minister goes to a country, and certainly we didn't see a joint statement like this back then, this kind of cooperation that the two countries are talking about, even if Salman Khurshid did go. Nalin Kohli, let me get you in on this question, A, of the significance of this joint statement, and B, of the Congress's criticism that politics is being played abroad. When the Prime Minister travels abroad, politics should be kept aside. Leave that for the election rallies, not for when you're representing India.
Well, there are two parts to this debate. The good news for the country, and the second part is the bad news for the Congress. So either way, I don't know how to take this debate further, but let's do it. I think Ambassador K.C. Singh and Ambassador Parthasarathy have given a wide description of what this entire visit does. The joint statement itself says a lot. It says a lot, it says it frankly, it says it very unequivocally. And I think that's for India to celebrate. That the visit was poised to at a different level was clear from the very fact that from the start, when the Prime Minister landed there, he was received, and that was very gracious of the Crown Prince there to receive him at the airport. Everything there had suggested that yes, this would be a visit that would be more than ordinary, right up to the event that will take place today, and you've shown it on your TV. These are not traditional voters of the BJP in that sense. These are Indian citizens who are celebrating the presence of the Prime Minister, which will be seen in an hour from now. Because Kerala is not exactly the state where the BJP has ever opened its account in terms of assembly or parliament. Now let's get down to the political part of it, because I think the strategic part has been well covered, and they are eminently, they can eminently do it better than me. The political part is, let's go one by one. Dr. Singhvi says it's evolutionary. If it's evolutionary, then perhaps this visit shouldn't have taken place. In 34 years, that evolution couldn't bring about a prime ministerial visit. Second, Dr. Singhvi then runs down the foreign minister. When 1 year of Prime Minister Modi's government was completed, at that time we had put it out that 102 countries were visited between the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister. Of course, the vast majority by the Foreign Minister also, excluding double counting where the two of them may have visited the same country. So it's not that the Foreign Ministry has not been active. It's been active also in trouble zones, which we touched upon in terms of the Yemen issue, which came up just recently in the discussion. The problem with the Congress party is the Congress party finds itself in a predicament. In terms of evolution, they don't do enough. And second is, when they criticize the Prime Minister for speaking the obvious, these are people, let's take the $75 billion fund. These are potential investors, as anywhere else in the world, who have been crying about why they couldn't invest in the Indian economy or the India story for successive years at an end. something was wrong, therefore they were not investing. Now either there's nobody's running down the Congress party individually or the former Prime Minister individually. It's an acknowledgement things were lethargic, things were not so. We are moving on and we are inviting you to come and invest in India. It's neither an investment into the BJP.
Is that the appropriate place to do it? Because he's the Prime Minister of India who represents India, who represents all of us. Is that the appropriate place? Because then it does become about
when you
politics.
talk to investors, and when investors are not looking at investors at the end of the day, irrespective whether they are Indian investors going abroad, Indian investors in India, foreign investors coming to India, they are going to speak on the currency of investment, which is going to talk about whether governance is sharper, whether governance is fast moving, whether governance decisions are taking place, whether there's follow-up, whether there's a policy that's encouraging investment. Basically, it's going to come down to that. It's not going to come down to whether the BJP and the Congress party are going to speak a language that is polite to each other. This is not rude to each other. It's not picking up and saying. And second is, when the Prime Minister addresses, for example, an Indian constituency, which are non-resident Indians, Indians of persons of Indian origin, that's a different audience. The Congress party, unfortunately, doesn't make a difference between the two types of audiences. The audiences that are there for investment and the audiences that are Indians who are going there not by force, they are going there to listen to the Prime Minister for the fact that he is a charismatic leader. So let's not mix it all together.
First, Ambassador KC Singh, ultimately when political statements are then made on foreign soil, we now know there is no consensus on foreign policy in India as there used to be once upon a time. That's a dream that's long over. So therefore, do you believe that it's politics or plain speak?
No, we shouldn't do it. I think it's not correct to carry your differences abroad, and that's a universally accepted principle amongst democracies, and particularly in a Gulf country, because you have very clear divisions there of politics, because a large population is from Kerala, and many of the social centers, communities like Kerala Social Center in Abu Dhabi is aligned to the Marxists. Another one is aligned to the Congress. So there's very clear orientation, although what the Emiratis do is they don't let you indulge in open political meetings, but the orientation of certain groups is very clear. So if you take your politics there, you're dividing the community. That is not a good thing. And your local hosts, they've had friendships with earlier regimes. Mrs. Gandhi was really respected there, etc. So you get no advantage in running down your previous government, and the local host is not necessarily impressed by that. However, coming to their investment in India, it's not that this has not been attempted before. Sheikh Mohammed and his two brothers, he had promised me before I moved to Iran that he'll come to India. And he did come in the middle of 2003 before I left, including with two brothers. Unfortunately, we were not able to use it. Mr. Yashwant Sinha was the foreign minister. He kind of took it in his stride. We didn't really capitalize on it to sit down with them, because the areas they're interested in would be like MR is interested in construction, or they'll be interested in oil and gas, which we were not disinvesting. So they are otherwise passive investors. They may have $800 billion, but they are not into every kind of manufacturing. They are interested in certain niche areas. Now, I don't know what assurances Prime Minister has given them, how we will draw them into these areas, or into solar power, or into new areas. I'm sure the new areas to look at.
They talked about $75 billion in infrastructure investment. So